Thanks for joining us on the program. I am Omini Odan. It is obvious that the second wave of COVID-19 is blowing across the globe when many nations are still grappling with the challenges of the pandemic already on ground. Nigeria, no doubt, is experiencing the second wave, going by the facts available and with the briefings of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Nigeria, with 49 recorded 1,843 cases, with 53,918, and with 51, just an interval of 2 days, Monday to Wednesday, recorded 1,889 cases, showing clearly new surge in the COVID-19 pandemic. The record actually calls for concern on all individuals and governments at all levels. The federal government has remained steadfast from inception of COVID-19 in the effort to combat the virus, committing huge funds to the national response. The second wave is largely due to non-compliance with non-pharmaceutical interventions and total disregard to public health protocols on COVID-19. In a swift reaction, President Muhammadu Buhari has extended the mandate of the Presidential Task Force for a further period till the end of March 2021, as against the slated December target to wind up the Presidential Task Force. The extension by the President is because of the new surge in the number of cases and the bid for vaccine. The President also mandated the Presidential Task Force to coordinate the process for planning and the strategy for accessing delivery and administration of the vaccine, using the existing health structures that have worked in the past in vaccine administration. The Presidential Task Force is also authorized to engage with the states in several areas, including enforcement, to manage the pandemic within their jurisdiction. The Presidential Task Force is also to liaise with the Nigerian Immigration Service to ensure that all inbound passengers are subjected to total COVID-19 protocol. Tonight on the program, our searchlights will be on mitigating second wave of COVID-19, the way out of it and the way forward. But for then, let's take this background put together by Mitare Ikpen.
The recent upsurge in COVID-19 cases has been quite worrisome. Even more worrisome is the fact that majority of the cases in recent weeks are critical, and mortality rate is on the increase.
Our epidemiological trend has already started to show that the COVID curve is rising, and there's a corresponding increase in the number and seriousness of cases requiring hospital admission in high dependency units for oxygen treatment or in ICU intensive care units for mechanical ventilation.
The nation's COVID-19 positivity rate went south to 3% late October, but by the second week of December, the curve has gone up to 10%. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has since placed everyone on red alert of a second wave of the pandemic, attributing it largely to disregard for COVID-19 non-pharmaceutical guidelines among Nigerians, a situation which has accelerated community transmission.
This current surge in cases is not driven by importation. No, it's driven by our behavior. We've looked at our data over the last 90 days or so. Even at the moment moment when we are having a slight increase in the number of positive cases coming in. We are averaging across the country at about 12 cases per day. At day 7, coming up positive. Since the epidemic took off properly, we've never had less than 80 cases reported. In fact, we've been averaging at between 150 to 200 cases for several months before the recent rise. So it's community transmission, it's our behavior, and we need to change.
The resurgence of COVID-19 cases has mounted pressure on health facilities, especially in the epicenters of Lagos, FCT, and Kaduna.
Go to the Gwagwalada, which is our main treatment center. The story is that the system is being overwhelmed. And not only Gwagwalada, most of the hospitals where we have isolated infectious treatment, they are being overwhelmed. This is not the time to politicize COVID-19. This is not the time to trivialize it. I have lost more close friends in this second wave of 1 month than I did from March to November.
And we're also asking state governors to please reopen your treatment centers. We are seeing a lot of cases going into the treatment centers, and we are already seeing very severe cases requiring ventilation.
While the PTF is working with state governments to step up enforcement of COVID-19 restrictions and compliance with non-pharmaceutical measures, news of the existence of deadlier strains of the virus in the United Kingdom and South Africa is also raising concerns about the need to suspend inbound flights from endemic countries. In Abuja, Mitaire Ikben, NTA News.
Mitigating second wave of COVID-19 in Nigeria. Mitaire Ikben's background report sets the tone for the takeoff of the program tonight. At some point, it's TuesdayLive. Our phone lines will be open. Please, if we are true to you, turn down the volume of the television set and go straight to the point. And please, in doing this, try to be polite with your language and your use of words. Also, you can be part of the conversation tonight through our Twitter handle at TuesdayLive NTA. We have a retinue of guests, and in the course of the program, we shall be taking you around the country in some centers to bring you up to speed of developments or to sustain the conversation on mitigating second wave of COVID-19. Tonight, I have joining us on the program Professor Abdulsalami Nasidi, OON, Pioneer DG, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, is also the Provost, College of Health Sciences, University of Africa, Bayelsa State. Welcome to TuesdayLive.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Also tonight, we're being joined by Dr. Jafia Abubakar, Deputy Incident Manager of the National COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center, led by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening, Nigerians.
Also tonight, joining us via Zoom in Abuja, we have the National Coordinator, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Dr. Sani Aliyu. Doctor, good to see you on the program. Okay, I believe if it's we'll continue with him. Well, let me begin with Professor Nasidi. If Professor Dr. Ali is up, we'll go straight to a particular issue. We are now within the second wave of COVID-19, and from records up to now, it is clear that the transmissibility is very, very high. What does it imply?
Well, this implies that unfortunately, we've missed the boat. That means, we relaxed. We did not follow all those non-pharmaceutical, protocols and recommendations of the NCDC and the PTF. And many Nigerians started doubting if at all COVID is real. Unfortunately, this is exactly what we did with HIV/AIDS, and we are now doing it with this same disease. And this means that we might have to pay dearly, for this laxity. The impact could be much more severe than we're anticipating. And, this is not only the experience of Nigeria, but many other countries, particularly African countries, They started thinking that COVID will not affect Africa, that we are immune to such viruses, and so on and so forth. That's the same way we did when we had HIV/AIDS outbreak at the early 80s or mid 80s, when Africans are saying that African skin is too thick, we can't catch AIDS. We ended up being, virtually the continent with the largest volume of people living with HIV/AIDS. So, lastly is the way the virus is behaving. It shows that it's very unstable. It's behaving like other respiratory flu viruses that change their colors, they change their skin, they change their coat very frequently. So if you have a flu virus that has caused an epidemic or pandemic this year, by next or second year, it might not be the same virus again. It keeps changing and changing. So we hope we don't end up with that type of virus. But unfortunately, we're already seeing evidence that this virus has the potential to change.
Okay, besides transmissibility, when you say we're not complying with, do you imply national response, state response, local response? Because the advocacy has been with one catchword: take responsibility.
Yeah.
What is the implication of this?
The implication of this is that, especially now, it's now beyond federal, beyond state, beyond. This is now the duty of everybody. Everybody must take responsibility, because the virus will not spare anyone. So if you don't take that responsibility, it's a big problem. First, federal. Federal must provide the wherewithal to empower, states and others to do what they have to do. I think that is going on not as bad as this, but fairly well. A lot of activities in terms of supporting the public, the states, with so many things, including palliatives, drugs, treatment centers. Some states are doing very well. And you can see, especially Lagos, Kaduna, FCT. FCT is doing excellently well, and, many others. So, but unfortunately, some are complacent. They are not doing what they're supposed to do. Their chief executives don't even believe in this. They are in denials, and that is dangerous for Nigeria. This must change. When it comes to, community and whatever, so the information has not really reached them. The risk communication is not strong enough. So down inside the community and all these people still are doubting that there's no, until unfortunately they start seeing more cases and more deaths before they wake up. It might be too late then.
Okay, let's go to Dr. Abubakar. Dr. Abubakar, from what Professor Naside is saying, I remember on Tuesday Live weeks back, we are done stemming second wave of COVID-19, and I remember vividly the National Coordinator of Presidential Task Force of COVID-19, Dr. Aliyu, said, if we slide into a second wave, then it will not be the strategy put in place for national response. It would likely be that we Nigerians are responsible, the states may not be up to speed, and the local government may not be up to speed. How do you address this?
Yeah, so essentially about this outbreak is everybody has a responsibility to play. It has always been our slogan that people should take responsibility. This is very important for me probably at this point to talk about how we can get infected with the COVID virus. The COVID virus is transmitted through a droplet infection, meaning that when people cough, when they talk loudly, when they sneeze, they are able to, expel these droplets. And when a susceptible person is close by, he can get this infection. Also, these droplets can fall on surfaces and they can live there for some time. So when people touch these surfaces, they get their hands contaminated, and people tend to, touch their faces, their noses, their mouth, their eyes, and then they get the infection through that. So we all have a responsibility in ensuring that we stop this transmission. How can we do that? We need to adhere, everybody need to adhere with the non-pharmaceutical interventions. These are simple interventions, not really, you don't have to take drugs, you don't have to take vaccines. What you need to do is to ensure that your hands are regularly, washed with soap and water, right? Because your hands can get contaminated, that's one. The second thing is you need to use the face mask. The face mask is a barrier between you, yourself, and the other person and the droplets. The third thing is to ensure physical distance between people. If we are able to do these three first initially, to some large extent we'll be able to control this pandemic. However, just like Professor has said, a lot of people don't even see this as a reality until when, it is much too late before they take action. So I want to appeal to Nigerians that we all have a responsibility to play. We all have a role to ensure that we stop this pandemic.
I understand the National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force, Dr. Aliyu, is on. He joined us via Zoom in Abuja. If you can see him, Dr. Aliyu, clearly it's no more news that the President has extended the mandate of the Presidential Task Force. But one thing very critical to it is the fact that reports indicate that Nigeria is now facing a rise in confirmed COVID-19 cases nationwide, which is similar to the second wave of infections occurring in other countries across the world. Does it mean your advocacy and sustained emphasis on people taking responsibility fell on deaf ears? What implication?
Thank you, Omini. Can you hear me clearly?
Doctor.
Can you hear me clearly?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
So apologies, my internet has been playing up this evening. With regards to your question, in terms of whether people have clearly stopped abiding by our protocol, there's no doubt they have. And if anything, we are now playing Russian roulette with our lives. The second wave at the moment looks like it's going to be very different to what we had in March, April. Already we're seeing an increased number of admissions into our treatment centers. People are presenting very sick. Unfortunately, some have died, and I know for some that have died, they have been, I know some of them actually have been, in a way, clearly in denial when it comes to COVID. They took very little precautions at a time when the risk was there. And what the public need to really realize is there are no two ways about this. Even if a vaccine is available today in Nigeria, it will take months before we start seeing the true impact of the vaccine, any vaccination campaign. And it's not even here yet. But here we have the equivalent of a vaccine, which are the non-pharmaceutical interventions, the wearing of face masks in public gatherings, the use of physical distancing, hand sanitizing hands, etc. These measures, as the previous speaker said, are simple measures that can protect you and stop you from catching this infection. Unfortunately, the general public have completely thrown caution to the winds. The risk perception is not there. We know from the PTF side that we have engaged in a lot of risk communication activities. We have engaged thousands, hundreds of thousands, in fact, about 800,000 volunteers were put out in the field to reach communities and spread the message. COVID-19 is real. To deny it will be to play a game of Russian roulette, really. And this thing is spreading. And it's spreading not just in Kaduna and Lagos and Abuja, which are the epicenters. It's actually spreading across the country. And it's mostly driven by the mass events that have been happening all over the country in the last few weeks, possibly related to festivities, etc. Today at the PTF, we had an end of year review with Mr. President. We will be implementing the measures that we have been directed to do. But more importantly, we will be working very closely with the state governments to enforce non-pharmaceutical interventions. This time around, it's going to be very different because the public need to realize that it's really a binary decision. It's either we apply these non-pharmaceutical interventions
the Presidential Task Force has, and I quote, is to engage state governments with a view to deploying legal structures to manage the pandemic within their jurisdiction. What does this imply?
That we are completely changing our strategy. Our strategy has always been top-down from the national side, but over the last 9 months, we've learned from some of the interventions. And I can tell you, Omini, that this time around, we know what to do clearly. Earlier on, we were applying interventions and trying to see what would have an impact. But we know clearly what we need to do to bring this epidemic down. But it's very much dependent on society cooperating with us. We cannot go into people's homes and change their behavior. Neither can the police be everywhere. But when it comes to state governments have apparatus, they have legal means by which they can enforce some of these measures. At the national level, for instance, we can only provide them with the minimum requirements. So yesterday, when the PTF chairman rolled out a number of measures, just to make it clear, these measures apply across the country. They may be called advisories, but in actual fact, they are very strong recommendations to all the state governments to apply this as a minimum. There might be a need for different approaches depending on the states, but they shouldn't relax. If anything, they should strengthen those measures that we have instituted, which include stopping these mass gatherings, closing the event centers, closing restaurants except for takeaways, etc., reducing the size of the workforce in offices, and enforcing the use of face masks in public spaces across the board, which includes all commercial premises, all offices, all markets, and putting in place measures to penalize those that fail to comply with these measures, including, if possible, application of mobile courts and also Spotify. But this time around, it's going to be different. It looks like it's going to be different, Omini, and it's really, really concerning for all of us. We can remember what happened with India back in March, April, when India was having a mild epidemic and everybody was commenting on how India got away with it. But see where they are now. Coronavirus does not differentiate. It doesn't differentiate based on color, neither does it differentiate based on countries. Countries that have similar weathers to us, like Brazil and India, have had terrible outbreaks. And when it comes to race or ethnicity, if you go to the US, for instance, your likelihood of death from COVID is far, far higher, is several-fold higher than that of the average white person. So it's nothing to do with our ethnicity, etc. We have been protected thus far. We've been lucky. But this time around, society really needs to sit up and realize that this is no longer a game. We need to protect ourselves if we want to survive through to 2021 and onwards. Over.
Take the next guest, still on, just for emphasis sake. If you take a drive around most state capitals, local government councils, villages, even the FCT, public places, it's as though we are back to the normal life, not the new normal. People are not using face masks. There's total disregard to the compliance with the COVID-19 protocol. Now, if you have a mandate to liaise more with the state government, are you coming up with sanctions that people will be arrested, maybe fined? Because it looks as though for now it's lip service. As such, people are not taking it serious. what is the Presidential Task Force doing in tandem with the states and local governments to ensure that sanctions and enforcement is visible and latent?
Most of what you said, apart from I think you mentioned something along the lines of a mandate, but I've missed most of the question you're putting forward.
As we speak, if you take a drive around cities, even the FCT, people have gone back to the normal lifestyle. Motor parks, public places, crowding, all that, without even complying with the COVID-19 protocol. So if we don't bite, they say you have dogs that can bark but don't bite. So we want to see a situation where you bark and bite. Is the PTA working towards this?
But the PTF can indirectly bite through the state governors and the FCT. And just this evening, we had a meeting with the subcommittee headed by Governor Okowa. We have spoken to both Kaduna, FCT and Lagos. They will be enforcing these NPI measures, and we are also working with the rest of the state governments to do the same. So, for instance, in Lagos, I understand they had a raid about a week ago last weekend, and they arrested thousands of people that were involved with clubbing, etc., and partying in the night. The same thing would apply. FCT already thinking about measures to restrict mass gatherings and to enforce this. They've already started their enforcement. They've started the process of setting up and running the enforcement teams again, which they had before. So all this is taking place, but the key message out to the public is this is collective responsibility. The government cannot police everywhere, but we certainly will not sit down and allow this situation to continue to deteriorate. We are really getting into difficult waters, and people need to realize that there's a limit to how much the health system can cope if it's overwhelmed. If you get sick and you require oxygen and it's all taken up, it doesn't matter whether you are a VIP or a poor person on the street. Nobody's oxygen will be taken off in order to provide you with oxygen. So we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful and make sure that we follow these non-pharmaceutical interventions. They will protect us. They would enable us to survive for as long as possible until such a time that we are able to get vaccines through. This epidemic will eventually go away, but as I keep on saying, we shouldn't allow it to go away with us. Over.
I understand Dr. John Tor Agbide has joined us now. Dr. John Tor Agbide is a neurotoxicologist and founder, CEO, in-country Medicare Secretary General, Integrative Medicine, West Africa. Welcome to Tuesday Live, Doctor.
Thank you, Omini.
In thoughts, I know you are a strong advocate of people sustaining and building their immunity to ward off COVID-19. With Nigeria now sliding into the second wave, and we hear clearly by Professor Nasidi's testimony that the transmissibility is very, very high, not peculiar to Nigeria, globally.
Well, I mean, this is an opportunity for us to educate Nigerians and also tell the people that COVID-19 is actually real. You know, when you talk about containing COVID-19, to me there is a three-pronged approach. All the while, what we hear is NPI, that is the non-pharmaceutical intervention. Great. It is one of, the pillars or the tripods that you can apply in controlling and containing this disease. The Presidential Task Force has done an excellent job, and likewise is media houses like NTA, like what we're doing, to educate the people and to tell them how to apply this non-pharmaceutical intervention, sanitizing of hands, social and physical distances, and then putting on, face masks. Great. There is another component which unfortunately we've not been emphasizing on, and this is the aspect of the body's defense ability against any disease at all. We have that ability, and that is our immune system. When we talk, less emphasis is being put on this. The body's immune system, if it is in place, even when you are exposed to the virus, either two things will happen. One, you will not get infected. Even when the virus exposes, the infectivity is that the degree of the viral load, that is what leads to clinical signs manifestation. If the body contains it, first the virus may not come to you, but even when it comes to you, you'll be able to, the body's immune system will be able to defend you so that the disease will not progress into a severe phase of the intensive care unit. You will come out of it. And we've seen that people who are immunologically, apt, even when they are challenged, they've been able to come up. And in our case in particular, there are people with underlying, comorbidities. Those are people who are immunologically compromised. These people need to beef up their immune system more than anything else. At this point, I would like to call on the Presidential Task Force and the federal government in particular. There should be a national policy on nutritional supplementation. We've done this in the past, and I will be very specific. Vitamin D has been known to be one of the most essential vitamins. Actually, vitamin D is not a vitamin. It is actually a hormone that plays a key role in both the innate aspect of the immune system and then the adaptive aspect of the immune system. The immune system has two arms. You have the innate arm and then you have the adaptive arm. All these arms, they require vitamin D. I will not go into details of innate arm of the immunity and adaptive arm of the immunity. So there should be a national food supplementation, nutritional supplementation policy on things like vitamin D. Studies have shown that people who are deficient in vitamin D, they come down with COVID-19 faster and even progress to a more severe form. That is the second arm. Then another one is vitamin C. These things should be made available. You have things like zinc. All these things should be made available so that they can help us build our own immune system. Then we talk about, vaccines. Vaccines, we all know, is far-fetched. Although we've been told that we're going to have vaccines here maybe next year or something, we're going to wait and see. It is not easy. Even when the vaccine, you are vaccinated, the body's ability to respond to the vaccine to elicit immunity depends on your nutritional status. If you are nutritionally compromised, that vaccines will not even work as well as it should have done. Then, the third aspect or challenge that we have in this COVID-19 is what Professor Nasidi had earlier mentioned, the issue of, mutation. Even when you have vaccines, but if the virus strain has mutated to a different strain, it will be difficult for you to be protected. This is one of the problems that we've been having with, the common flu. Every year they will say, oh, they're vaccinating this. They have to try to track down, the mutations so that they will come up with the appropriate, vaccines. So let's use this three-pronged approach. Let's not just look at non-pharmaceutical intervention. Non-pharmaceutical intervention, no doubt, will slow the rate of the spread of the disease. But the ultimate goal is what we're looking for. That's the immunity that will be elicited, from the body. You talk about, attaining immunity. It is very important, so that even when you have mutations, your body is there, is well, up going immunologically, immunomodulation, and you can handle the disease better, if not that the disease cannot come to you. So I call for a national, nutritional supplementation policy. We've done that in case of, goiter. That's why you have iodine that has to be added, to the salt. Then we have cases of, vitamin A fortification. We should come up with, vitamin D and then vitamin C and a lot of other, micronutrients that play key roles in immunological, enhancement.
Dr. John Toabide. Now, I would love to go to Dr. Jafia, but before then, Dr. John Toa has raised very thorny issues hinged on immunology, that is immune, and he is advocating a national policy on nutritional supplementation with emphasis on vitamin D. And he said this worked regarding goiter. Now this is COVID-19. Is this workable?
Well, anything that will assist to boost person's immunity is very crucial. And absolutely agree with him. Whatever intervention you have, if you intervene in a hungry person, you know that most of your interventions might not work, except he's nourished. So I absolutely agree, and all those supplements he talked are very useful in boosting your immune defense mechanisms. And at the same time, we have to prioritize our approach. The stage we are now is we're in crisis. Not Nigeria, but the whole world is in crisis. And so the measures we need to take has to be the measures that will address that crisis and mitigate the impact of what is happening. If you remember in Europe, and some other countries, even some states in the US, when the second wave was coming, it's at its imminent period when it's just starting, the government was contemplating imposing a lockdown in some of those states and countries, and the people protested. They came out. They said they don't want, lockdown. They don't need all those pharmaceutical this and so on and so forth. But when they now saw that the virus was getting out of hand, and number of cases were increasing exponentially, number of deaths was doubling. If you remember, Dr. Fauci in the US predicted that by December, this was in about September or August, September, he said by December there could be up to 300 deaths in the US. And the president was looking at him, and people say, oh, this is, very unfair for him to say that and so on and so forth. But as of today, we are about 320,000 deaths in the US. So when the virus now escapes and started, becoming too devastating on the public will cave in and, start going. So the national policy on nutrition is very useful, but the key now is how do we do the next three most important things? Be ahead of this virus. Make sure that we can, stop or reduce its transmissibility and get our Nigerian people protected. That is number one. Number two, have enough mechanisms to mitigate its impact. That is, to limit the number of people this virus can kill. And, that means we have to strengthen and fortify our treatment centers and do everything possible to reduce severity of the virus, of the disease. Then the last one is the real active immunity stimulation. So what he said are usually, active, passive immunity through nutritional approach, but the most straightforward one is the vaccines. So now, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was no vaccine. As I'm talking to you now, there are several candidate vaccines. The vaccines are in place. So our, response strategy to really, mitigate the impact of this second wave in particular, because second wave could be more vicious from the way we are seeing things than the first wave. So we have tools now to fight it, luckily. And those tools, I've mentioned the first two. Then the third one and most important one now is the vaccine. So we must start doing everything possible to acquire the vaccine. But as I'm talking to you now, even though we have several manufacturers already, pushing their vaccines out, some are already, endorsed or approved by the FDA, by the country's FDAs. But we also might not be able to have our hands on those vaccines, except, as Dr. Sani Aliu said, we really, re-strategize on many fronts. On our risk communication, our strategy to acquire the vaccine, our strategy to actually apply the vaccine and make sure that most of those who are at risk, get it. For instance, now I'll give you an example. In the U.S., the president signed what is called a executive order. So no vaccine leaves the U.S. until all Americans get it, and it's right. So, that puts us at risk in Africa or in the poor countries, middle and low-income countries. If you don't manufacture your vaccine, the third most important tool you need to fight this disease will not be available to you easily. Even though we are talking, we shall get through other means, COVAX, etc. So these are the three things that I think we should concentrate on now. We are in crisis. We must not wait. If the house has caught fire, you don't wait for any other suggestions. If you don't have water, you are in trouble.
Okay, we made efforts to have the Nigerian who played a major role regarding the Pfizer vaccine. Mm-hmm. Well, we are still making effort. You may offer some line of thoughts tonight. Mm-hmm. But quickly, I remember when we talked about stemming Nigeria sliding into second wave, mm-hmm. you came up with the politics of the vaccine, the mm-hmm. global politics, mm-hmm. and you have said so right now, mm-hmm. that the U.S. president says mm-hmm. no vaccine leaves the U.S. until all Americans are administered with the vaccine. Mm-hmm. So what should Nigeria do? Where Nigeria and indeed Africa is depending on other nationals, other countries to have the vaccine. We have research institutes in the country. Mm-hmm. What should Nigeria do? Maybe to tinker towards having the vaccine manufactured locally.
I think, just on a nutshell, Nigeria is doing a lot. And I'm happy to, list some of the things we are doing. First and foremost, today, the Honorable Minister of Health had a meeting with the Russian parties, to discuss the possibility of Nigeria acquiring the Russian, a double vector vaccine, which is most likely will be one of the good vaccines that will be good for Africa. Also like AstraZeneca vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, they are among the best, but unfortunately the logistics to apply them might be too high for Africa for now. So we are doing something.
But that is the worry now.
Yeah.
We have the HEPs. Mm-hmm. Nigeria has everything it takes. Mm-hmm. Why is it that we cannot, with all the scientists we have, mm-hmm. the medical experts we have, mm-hmm. when we go out, the national coordinator of COVID-19, for instance, mm-hmm. Dr. Sani Aliu, mm-hmm. was brought in from somewhere mm-hmm. to head this. Why can't we, as a country, manufacture our own? Must we depend on other places to manufacture vaccines?
Well, that is exactly what, now, if you allow me, I will have said,
go ahead, sir.
Well, why didn't we do it? I was involved in vaccine manufacturing. I was the head of the Yaba Vaccine Manufacturing Laboratory for about 6 years. And when I came, there was virtually, no serious manufacturing. Like, for instance, yellow fever vaccine that was manufactured there, they were producing just about 120,000 per annum. Within just 9 months, I increased it, and we were producing between 1 to 2 million doses. And you can't believe it, when we had one of the largest yellow fever outbreaks in Nigeria, or even in the world, that affected Benue and Ogbomoso in western Nigeria in 1986-87, the first vaccines that were deployed to fight that outbreak was the vaccine we manufactured at Yaba. And luckily, we had an opportunity to test that vaccine against the one manufactured by Institut Pasteur. We had better protection level than theirs that even came. We had about 98.7, while theirs was about 97.5 or something. And this was carried out together with CDC Fort Collins. So we had efforts to manufacture vaccine ongoing. Along the way, Nigerian way, everything's scattered. But as I'm talking to you, there's already clear, new initiative to manufacture to empower Nigeria to be self-sufficient in vaccine manufacturing. Nigerian government, with me and Baker, established, a public-private partnership system or establishment that will manufacture vaccines called bio vaccines. And that bio vaccines is already empowered by the federal government to go into partnership with other manufacturers. And we are talking about transfer of technology with the Russians, with AstraZeneca and others, and see which vaccines can we get. Then lastly, you can't believe we have very powerful research institutes now in Nigeria that are already, experimenting with our own indigenous vaccine products. For instance, there's one Professor Happy at Ede in the Redeemers University. That laboratory is international standard. They characterize the COVID virus that came in here within 2-3 weeks, and inform the world the type of strain we have. So there's a candidate vaccine that will soon go into trial. So you can see that the 3 ways Nigeria is already doing something, but it's unfortunate. To answer that your question, I will say it's the usual Nigerian system where, you start very well and everything goes down. Look at our Nigerian railway. It was so good, one of the best in the world, better than Indian one. Then we went down, it's completely grounded, and then we are now starting again. So maybe this is the same thing with our vaccine efforts. So not only vaccine, but even biologicals. For instance, Ebola in West Africa, when it came, we couldn't do anything because we didn't have vaccine, we didn't have even the biologicals to fight it. So some of us actually went into the lab and we developed, a new, serum for protection, from this disease. And this have been tested preclinically, have passed all the clinical phases. We have presented it to the Nigerian government and no response. So, but now I think their eyes are opening that other countries are using it. The monoclonal and polyspecific antibodies that we can use to actually reverse the clinical trend of Ebola and mitigate and make it to kill less people. For instance, if the case fatality rate is up to 80%, with this serum, you can reduce it to less than 10%. And we have that technology. We have published it. I'm part of the team that developed it. So other countries like India also, they will have, been putting money there and so on and so forth. But the good news is that we're already talking with the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of, Health, Ministry of, Foreign Affairs to see how this can all be brought to life.
Okay. Thank you so much. Before we lose touch with the focus tonight, now, back to Dr. Safia Abubakar of NCDC. Dr. Safia, part of the problem here is, by the records, 10 to 11 months into the pandemic in Nigeria, the NCDC is yet to test up to 1 million of the population of more than 200 million. Are we not in a more precarious case than we think, now that Nigeria has slided into the second wave?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll really start by saying that at the beginning of this pandemic, we had fairly just 1, 2, 3 labs. But at the moment, we have labs in all the 36 plus 1 states in Nigeria. Some of the states have 2, 3, 4 labs. The other thing I want to mention is that we have the capacity to test about 15,000 samples on daily basis. However, what we tend to see is we're testing much less than 15,000 a day. We're testing probably in 4,000, 5,000 a day. So we are actually encouraging the states to really find these cases and send them to the laboratory for testing. Unfortunately, this is not happening. We've shared a lot of protocols, a lot of guidance with the states on how they can find these cases and ensure that we are testing. We do have the capacity to really test up to 15,000, but we're not doing that at the moment. So we'll still continue to engage with the states, still, to ensure that, we get these cases and we get to test them. As of today, we we're just a little below 900,000. And then the testing numbers you can see in the last couple of days has increased. In fact, we're looking at, because people are panicked now, people will be going out really for the testing. So in the next coming days, probably we'll see a rise in the testing figures. We have also been ensuring that all the consumables that are needed by these labs, we provide them to them. And where we have, issues here and there, we send biomedical engineers to go and see how they can fix those issues. But essentially, really the problem is about case finding, not about the capacity to do the testing.
What do you make of testing without results? I remember when we did the last episode of stemming slide into second wave of COVID-19, I made a case here where institutions, including NTA, NCDC did tests, and months after, we are yet to get results. What do you make of testing without results? Does it make any difference?
Yeah, so initially there were that challenges. We had those challenges at the beginning. It takes like, 4 or 5 days before results are gotten. But I can assure you now that the systems have been automated. Immediately you conduct you get your samples tested. You get the results within 48 hours at the maximum. And they usually send text messages, like I said, through the automation. But also what we also see recently is that a lot of the other labs in the other states are relaxing because of the festivities, so they overburden the laboratory that we have here in the at the center, such that it causes a little delays sometimes in ensuring that these tests are carried out to the letter. But also, just quickly to mention, we usually engage with the states, and we have identified, we've asked the state to identify what are their needs for the festivities, what kind of consumables do they need, so that, this testing will continue at their own end. They don't have to burden the National Reference Laboratory. So I'm sure now these timelines have tremendously improved. What you are talking about probably could be like 3-4 months ago, and not really now.
Thank you. Let's go to the National Coordinator. Dr. Aliyu, I'm being very copious tonight because this thing is so worrisome. It affects everybody as we speak, and we need to, like we say, take responsibility. Let me be very copious here. Close all restaurants except those providing services to hotels, residents. Those involved in takeaways, home deliveries, and drive-in shall remain closed. PTF advises state governments to henceforth close all bars, nightclubs, event centers, and recreational venues to curb community transmission. Also, restrict all informal and formal festivity events, including weddings, conferences, congresses, etc. Does this mean we are heading towards another lockdown?
Thank you, Omini. No, we are not in a lockdown yet, because if we are in a lockdown, nobody goes out. People stay at home. But we are looking at alternatives to a lockdown. There are very good reasons why we went for these industries, because these particular industries are the ones that attract people most. Some of them, right from the beginning, we never really relaxed. If you remember, when we had the lockdown, we went into several phases.
With us. Back to Dr. Aliyu. Let me go back to Dr. John Tor. Dr. John Tor, now you came up with an advocacy that you advocated a national policy on nutritional supplementation with emphasis on vitamin D, and Professor Nasidi alluded to that and gave some explanation. Now, if I ask you, common sense, maybe education to Nigerians who are listening to us tonight, self-building of immune system, how do we go about it?
Well, building the immune system actually depends the state which you are. Because if you talk about vitamin D, maybe people who have limited knowledge will tell you that, oh, we can get vitamin D from the sun. Why are you talking about, supplementation? We also know that we can get vitamin D maybe from the yolk of, the egg. By the way, the yolk of the egg just contains about 40 international, units of, vitamin D if you are taking the right quality egg. So we're talking of a situation where there is a normal. You can use these natural sources to actually supplement and augment for your vitamin C. I'm not into clinical practice here, but I'm telling you, if you come to our center, the level of vitamin D, and this is an acceptable data generally, amongst the blacks is about less than 10% of the population. So you see that we are prone to that deficiency by way of modified lifestyle, that we don't even go out to get that vitamin D that you claim that comes from the sun. It actually comes, but how many of us actually go out to this in the sun to get that vitamin D? Secondly, this black skin that contains melanin that is supposed to protect us from ultraviolet rays from the sun actually limits the amount of vitamin D that can be produced in the body of the blood. So we have disadvantages. So I'm saying that yes, there are natural ways of doing it, but in crisis situation like this, there is an overwhelming demand on the body. So that's why we're calling for nutritional, supplementation. Then I can go even further. You're not just talking about oral supplementation. All people that come to our center, and I can tell you, their vitamin D is low, we give them vitamin D by way of injection, so injectable vitamin C. So you can do the natural source of getting, vitamin D for one, or C through citrus fruits or oranges. You can also do the oral supplementation, but in an overwhelming demand and acute situation like this, you need injectable vitamin D. Other, micronutrients are also abound there. Before, these things were only found in places like, the United States and then Germany. But with our in-country made care, we're able to secure this and we're able to give them, parenterally. And our doctors, do this. And the result has been very, very overwhelming. And again, as I said earlier, we're not just talking vitamin D because we want to talk vitamin D. There is direct correlation. In fact, what they did, they used what they call the C-reactive protein as a surrogate to actually draw up that causal relationship between low dose vitamin D and COVID-19, and then the degree of progression to the severe form of the disease too. They measure this. So these are the various ways. And then when we talk about immunity, I want to emphasize here again, immunity too is not all about nutrition. There are other lifestyles like exercise, very important. Then you're talking about sleep. We have talked about sleep, deprivation. Sleep is also very important. It is when you sleep that actually it boosts your sleeping alone, boosts your immune system. So when I talk about immunity is very complex and all-encompassing. It is something we should all practice so that we get to that immune system. Then let me also make this point. You see, all we're talking about disease, COVID-19. We can control it and attain it when we achieve what we call the herd immunity. And herd immunity for COVID-19, it means 50 or 65 or 66% of the population has to be covered, either through vaccination or whatever method you use to get that immunity. Vaccination, this means that over half of Nigerian population have to be vaccinated for us to attain herd immunity that can now give us that confidence level that yes, we are in control of this disease. You know what that means? The vaccine is being produced. We don't even have access to it. How are we going to do that if we just depend on this? But as Professor Nasir said, yeah, vaccine is the ultimate solution. But other than that, you can also have your immune system as a backup. After all, through vaccination, you are hoping to attain that, immunity. Another thing that we should not forget, when you talk about second wave can, yes, happen as a result of non-adherence to non-pharmaceutical interventions so that enhances the spread. But the issue of mutation can also, take for example, what is happening in Britain now. The strain of the virus that has come up, known as B117, is a more virulent strain that they had manage and contain. But if you have a well immune system, when that virus also mutates, the immunity is actually non-specific. It is actually guided. It can guide against and contain a new strain too. So immunity is one of the things we should not negate. And as you ask, there are various ways that you can do it, depending. You can do the natural way. I'm just emphasizing that point again of getting those micronutrients, vitamin D or vitamin C or zinc or curcumin, and then a lot of others. There's selenium in that package. Then there is a way you can also do natural supplementation. Then you at a high and overwhelming situation like this, you need injectable forms of these micronutrients, which are available.
If you're just joining us, we're taking a look at mitigating the second wave of COVID-19 in Nigeria. It's time to take some reports, but before then, measures to check further spread by the state governments are increased surveillance, multiple sample collection centers in the rural areas, and aggressive enlightenment. There are also applicable levels of compliance with COVID-19 protocol by residents. Our first report tonight is coming from Lagos. When we come back, we take other aspects, and you heard Dr. John talked about strains of COVID-19, B117, quite new to some of us. First report tonight is coming from Lagos.
The drop in cases of COVID-19 in August and September came as a huge relief to most Nigerians. People were optimistic that life would gradually return to normal. However, ignoring new safety habits and lifestyle not only crumbled previous efforts at curbing the spread of COVID-19, it complicated things. The result is a second wave with a rising number of cases daily.
If we are prepared for the second wave back then, perhaps the second wave wouldn't come. So we therefore have to step up preparedness.
Nigerians need to be reminded that COVID-19 is still with us. It's still on ground, it's still in Nigeria.
We don't want lockdown. We will use sanitizer and face masks to cover our nose.
Of every 100 COVID-19 tests performed in Lagos at present, 10 are positive. This is an increase from the 5 per 100 cases recorded in September. This shows that the number is rising in all local government areas of the state, indicating an upsurge in community transmission. Now that the country is battling a second wave, government has ordered the reopening of isolation centers. So far, Lagos still remains the epicenter in Nigeria, and the state government has directed the reactivation of initial preventive measures, urging the people to strictly adhere to them in order to contain the virus and save lives.
We should go back to the NPIs, the use of face masks. People who use it sometimes oftentimes put it on the chin rather than putting it to cover the face and the mouth.
The state government is also ramping up testing, surpassing 3,000 tests a day. So far, Lagos has carried out more than 200,000 tests with over 26,000 positive cases recorded. The state alone accounts for 25% of the total number of tests nationwide.
With regard to understanding of the disease symptomatology, we are better informed. Diagnostic capacity, we are better capable.
That's a report from Lagos, and the fear of the spike in COVID-19 infections has forced authorities to come up with preventive measures, from total shutdown of schools. Now the state governments have asked civil servants, even at the federal level, below level 14, to work from home. Our next report, still sustaining the conversation, is from Lafia, Nasarawa State.
After achieving tremendous results in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic in the country, the disease is resurfacing across the country, given the daily update by Nigeria's Center for Disease Control. Stakeholders say this is not unconnected with lack of adherence to protocols and measures put in place by the NCDC.
One of the major causes of this, as you would have noticed, is that we have let down our guards.
With the establishment of testing centers in the state, observers say the public need to be informed through sensitization.
What we've decided to do right now as a ministry and as a state is to re-intensify the awareness creation measures. It appears that over time that the sensitivity and compliance with preventive measures by most people have waned.
I tested myself and the result came out negative. And it's good for everybody to come and know his status.
Experts say the second wave of the outbreak may be dangerous and warn people against risky behaviors detrimental to public health. They suggest that the only way out is to sustain laid down protocols. As the popular saying goes, health is wealth.
With the reports there, when we return, we take other perspectives to mitigating the second wave of COVID-19 in Nigeria. Before then, let's take a break. Stay with us.
For now, the best and most efficient way to avoid getting infected is through regular hygienic and sanitary practices, as well as social distancing. As individuals, we remain the greatest weapon to fight this pandemic. By washing our hands regularly with clean water and soap, disinfecting frequently used surfaces and areas, coughing into a tissue or elbow, and strictly adhering to infection prevention control measures in health facilities, we can contain this virus.
Coronavirus is real. Steps to avoid this pandemic. Wash your hands regularly or sanitize your hands. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Stay at home unless absolutely necessary. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth if your hands are not clean. Avoid the spread of coronavirus. Coronavirus is real.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying tuned, and our focus tonight is mitigating second wave of COVID-19. While the reports were on, a couple of tweets have churned in, and I'll take the first tweet to Dr. Sani Aliu, National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. We lost signals with him, but I believe the signals are up now. Dr. Aliu, the tweet from David Umar says, it should be noted that the distribution of the vaccines across the world will be slow. Thus, Nigeria should look inwards and prescribe policies or solutions that are peculiar to our situations for mitigating the second wave of COVID-19. And as a rider, if we play with the second wave, what are the likely consequences?
I'll start with the second point. If we play with the second wave, it's not going to be good for the country. We can't even consider that, because we're talking about people's lives. The government will never sit down and allow this sort of situation to continue. At the moment, we are pleading with the public. We are trying to get your support, your cooperation, to get people to understand that this is a collective responsibility. And if we really do not want to have another lockdown, that which will severely affect our economy, the only option is to make sure that we comply with these non-pharmaceutical interventions, and in particular stop this game of attracting the virus through these mass events that have been happening all over the place. But certainly government will never sit down and allow this situation to deteriorate. We are monitoring very closely. We really don't want to lock down. I'm sure most people don't want the same to happen. We know what happened back in April when we locked down for 5 weeks. It was very difficult for the public, but at the same time, we're talking about life and death here. No responsible government will sit down and allow its people to be dying of preventable illness. In terms of having a local solution, well, yes, it's very true. The vaccines will not be with us immediately. It's not something that will come in tomorrow or the next day. And we still have interventions in place that can work. And these interventions are called what? Non-pharmaceutical interventions. And they are vaccines in themselves, because some of them, if delivered consistently, will be just as effective as some of the vaccines that are coming out. But we must also remember that the process for vaccine development and manufacture is not an easy one. Even though the world has been able to come up with a coronavirus vaccine over such a short period of time of just 9 months. But remember, some of these countries have been involved with mRNA technology for a long time. These are not vaccines that have been produced through the normal development process. No, it required the use of technology and a lot of resources. If we were to start our own vaccine process here, we will have to go through various hoops, including both the scientific and the technical aspects, as well as the clinical trials, the studies that have to be done to prove efficacy. So while we are not saying completely that, no, we shouldn't have a Nigerian solution, we certainly should be aspiring in the future to make sure that we can compete with other countries when it comes to scientific development. But at this point in time, our priority is to make sure that people comply, and also to make sure that these vaccines that are now being used outside the country are available for our citizens ASAP. Thank you.
Sure. Now, let's look at the politics of the vaccines. I know Dr. Professor Nasiri last time has said that when it comes to vaccines, the manufacturing countries would not send it out until it has gone round. And today he emphasized and said the United States president says no vaccine leaves the United States until it has gone round the entire country. Yet, we have this politics of the vaccine. There's a school of thought that says don't accept the vaccine, don't allow it to be administered on you. Yet, we are in a second wave. How is the PTF going to manage this?
Continue to engage very closely, not only with state governments, but also with government agencies that have traditionally been involved in vaccine administration and distribution, such as the Primary Healthcare Development Agency and the Federal Ministry of Health. We have also for the first time, because really today was the day that we were actually given the mandate to get involved with the vaccine side. Remember, when the PTF was inaugurated in March, there were no vaccines in sight. So if you look at our mandate, it's actually today that Mr. President gave us the marching order to get engaged and to make sure that this process is sorted out. We've had meetings with the National Assembly yesterday. I'm sure you're aware of this, and we've also been linking up with Gavi, which is the Global Alliance on Vaccine Initiative. Gavi has a facility, a COVAX facility, which is guaranteeing 20% of the vaccine requirements for Nigeria. But this will be given free by Gavi. However, we will need to sort out the funding for both the operational side and as well as the administration. We also need to get our own funds for an additional 40%. We need between 60 to 70% of Nigerians to be vaccinated over the next 2 years. We have a pretty good idea of the funds required. The PTF is in a very strong position to coordinate and also provide multisectoral support because the vaccine issue is not just a health problem. It's, as you said, it's a political problem. There are nationalistic tendencies. Therefore, we're not going to restrict ourselves to just one particular vaccine. We'll look at the science and we'll make sure that the science fits in with our needs. Vaccines that have been proven to be effective and safe will be procured by the federal government, and there's a lot of work going on behind the scene to make sure this happens. But as I keep on saying, for the meantime, before we get the vaccine, we must protect ourselves, and there are things that we can do to make sure that we protect ourselves. Vaccines are great, but vaccines alone will not sort out this epidemic. We have to combine it with other non-pharmaceutical interventions. To me, the biggest challenge when it comes to the vaccine delivery and administration isn't just the logistics, which I believe we'll be able to overcome. It's actually the social acceptance of the vaccine. The social media have been awash with all sorts of fake news and all sorts of issues about vaccine safety, which really reminds me of the polio, the time we had the difficulties with polio. And there's a need, certainly, for us to start this risk communication very early on to raise public awareness of the need for people to accept these vaccines when they come in, to reassure them that they are safe. And as you can see, it's a general problem. It's not just in Nigeria. It's across the country. There's a lot of doubts as to whether these vaccines are safe. But the clinical trials themselves were done on thousands of people. And another good thing is by the time the vaccines arrive in Nigeria, hundreds of millions of people in the world would have received these vaccines. So if there's a safety issue, it will come up. Clinical trials very much depend on the power of numbers. The more people you have engaged in a clinical trial or experiencing being administered a drug, the more likely you are to pick up issues if there are issues with those drugs. But we definitely need to work very closely with your sector, especially the media, to make sure that the public are aware and accept the importance of being vaccinated against COVID-19. Over.
I'll come to Dr. Abubakar quickly. Let's go to Dr. John Tagbide. John Tagbide, this particular tweet relates with you, so let me pass it on to you. Chimeziri says, Nigerians are yet to see an indigenous or local ideas and approach towards the fight against COVID-19. The government seems to copy and paste ideas from Europe and America. Improving immunity should be part of the sensitization against COVID-19. How do you react?
Well, number one, I want to say kudos for him to saying that. This has been, the message, and we talk about, immunity. Very few people want to listen to that. But the bottom line is that your immune system is key. And as I've emphasized before, even the vaccination, what are you seeking out, to achieve? It's a good immunity. So, while we're waiting for the vaccine to come, and by the way, the business of vaccine production or drug production is no child's play. Let's not deceive ourselves. Nigeria is, it will take a lot for us to, mobilize our human and capital resources, the infrastructure, for us to get it on the right, direction of producing, vaccines. These vaccines, some of these technologies that we're talking, like the mRNA, technology, vaccines that Pfizer, BioNTech, and Oxford have, produced. This is never just started, a year or two. They're also capital, intensive. So why don't we fall back to what is available to do what is, desirable? There is a saying that when the desirable is not available, the preferable becomes, the desirable. So let's do with what we have. But this has been my message, and this has been, the emphasis. Non-pharmaceutical interventions are great. There is no doubt about that. But what you seek out to achieve through non-pharmaceutical intervention is to break the transmission, so that you are able to contain it. But thereafter, what happens? It is true that the virus can stay for a number of years if you are able to do non-pharmaceutical interventions and contain it and possibly wear away. But while you are waiting for the virus to wear away, the immune system or your body's system is the best assurance that you have. Let's do this. Let's listen to this and put it into action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, before I go to Dr. Abubakar, just reaching us here, we have the COVID-19 update from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. It indicates that there are 999 new cases confirmed for Nigeria. The breakdown shows that FCT has 416, Lagos 324, Kaduna 68, Plateau State 42, Kwara 32, Kano 24, Gombe State 14, Sokoto 12, Yobe State 12, Akwa Ibom State 11, Bayelsa 10, Rivers 7, Bauchi 7, Ogun State 6, Oyo State 5, Edo 4, Taraba 4, and Jigawa State 1. Total confirmed cases now stands at 79,789. Discharged cases 68,879, and deaths 1,231. That's the update as at 22nd December 2020 COVID-19 update in Nigeria. Quickly, Dr. John talked about strands, and Professor Nasisi talks about strands, and I take this question to Dr. Abubakar from NCDC. Now, COVID-19 infections rate among young people has increased, and who subsequently infect older and more vulnerable family members. How do we place this? Initially, it was as though it was the elderly that were prone to it. Now it has changed. The younger people get it more and even infect the elderly. How do we place this?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Even from the beginning, all age groups are really affected by COVID-19. What we have seen recently is that more of the infections, we tend to see them between the ages of 21 years to 30 years old. The percentage has, increased slightly. And this could there could be a lot of things that could, be attributed to that. Initially, they are not that, it doesn't show on them because their immunity is strong. They don't tend to show the signs of the disease in those, ages. So probably they were not taking any precaution. They feel that it's only the elderly that are more vulnerable, and it is only the elderly that have the severe outcome. So, but what we are seeing now is that even the younger ages, 20 to 30, do get the infection, and then the infection rate in this category has also increased. The other thing is that ages 21 to 30 years are mostly the ones that are probably going to schools. We have seen that schools have been, opened recently. The NYC camps have also been opened. So probably, we can attribute it to those close settings. Now, having said that, let me just quickly also mention that this population that we are talking about are the ones that when they get back to their, respective houses, they can infect the elderly and where we have, severe outcomes. So the message is to everybody, especially to the young population that goes out, please ensure that you adhere to the non-pharmaceutical interventions. We will not get tired of talking about the non-pharmaceutical interventions because they seem to be what we have in hand now that can help us to stem the tide of this, pandemic. The second thing I'm going to talk about also is to appeal to our employers of labor, is to appeal to people that, have business premises to ensure that they enforce some of these NPIs in their premises. If people are going into your premises, ensure you take their temperature. If people present with fever, they should not be allowed, into such premises. The second thing is people should wear face masks before they go into your premises. And of course, please ensure you have hand washing facilities within your premises. Also, at this point in time, I want to appeal to our people. I want to appeal to everybody. We have to make do with a little, inconveniences. If you don't have to travel, you don't have to travel. Please, these times, stay at home with your loved ones, and as much as possible, avoid, going into, large gatherings, because large gatherings, just like we've had, they are the events that are called super spreader events. Within our population, even, COVID, in 80% of, people, they are asymptomatic. You don't really see the signs. So you don't even know who carries, the COVID virus. So it is very important, we avoid mass gatherings. We ensure that we adhere to the NPIs. That is what I have to say. Thank you.
Let's go to Professor Nasir. Professor Nasir, as it is, if you go to some environment, some climes, let's be emphatic about Nigeria. Somebody takes ill, and when they say go to the hospital, they say, no, if you go to the hospital, they say it's COVID-19. Regarding testing, what advocacy can you make, or what ideas can you churn out so that we take a new dimension towards testing? People are not willing to come out to test. And you heard from one of the reports from the states, the guy talked about people should come out and test. The issue of stigma, we know the testimony regarding HIV/AIDS. We also know very well that if people don't come out to test, the figures, we won't get data for government to know what exactly to do. We're already in the second wave. So what will you offer in this direction?
Well, thank you. The most important is how do you get somebody to understand that it's in danger? It's like you are in the jungle, you are alone, you are surrounded by snakes, by lions and this, and if you don't see them, you don't know you are in danger. So that is the tragedy of our story here. We are in danger, and yet many don't know. For instance, somebody said, you should know your status, go and test and all this. This is not the case with COVID-19. The key is how to really, get the communities to accept that they are in danger. Risk communication. So it's beyond the labs, it's beyond the PTF, the state systems to do it, but what is key now is we mobilize those communication institutions like NOAA, like the media, all the things that can tell the people that we are in danger, not as me or you or me, but as a community. So who are the best people that can help us do this? The traditional rulers, the traditional healers. We don't ignore them because the people are close to them, and of course the religious leaders. These are the people that most of the community doesn't come in contact with daily than any health official. what is very crucial also is to know, we are having so many deaths now. If you go to many communities, they will tell you we're having increased number of deaths. Even in the FCT, in the rural areas, your relations, we are hearing, so many people are there, and what's happening? Maybe some of those deaths are actually due to COVID, and we don't know because we're not testing. And so there's a problem of communication, there's a problem of outreach, and there's a problem of capacity. Do we have enough reagents to actually do the test and then communicate? So at the beginning of this program, you mentioned, why is it that up to now Nigeria has not tested up to 1 million?
Sure.
So we have to accept failure. We have some failures along the line that even countries that are smaller than us and all this have gone beyond 2-3 million. South Africa is now hitting 7 million tests and so on and so forth. So, there is something missing that we need to, do to get increase testing of samples. It's not just testing of those traveling or testing of those that are just sick, but when we started, this fire, we started very well. Any case that we saw, we did active case search, contact tracing, and so on and so forth. So we go into the communities, we get all those who are in contact with this person, and then we do the testing. We are losing that. So it's not that people don't want to come to test. Everybody who hears somebody has COVID around him wants to be tested. I can assure you that. Everybody who hears that somebody either with COVID or is sick in the hospital with COVID wants to get tested. The other groups that want to be tested, surely 100% are the healthcare workers, the security people, that are coming in contact with any person, the police, the army, they need to be tested. And so it's even easy by getting all of them tested and getting the high-risk groups tested, we can surpass that number of 1 million also very quickly. So the best way to really increase our ability to test is to empower the labs, to empower the risk communicators, and encourage the people to come out to test.
Okay. Well, we take the next line of reports, and when we come back, we sustain the conversation in the area of why we must take responsibility to not to allow governments across the levels to take a much more drastic decisions that we may not all be happy about. It's about you, it's about me, it's about all of us to take responsibility to ensure that COVID-19 is really not a husk. Our next report is coming from Sokoto.
After several months of first COVID-19 lockdown in Nigeria, and life is gradually returning to normal with less number of daily cases of the disease, here comes another source of concern with rising number of cases daily. Sokoto State has more than 40 active cases with almost 1,500 pending tests.
The recent increase in the number of cases, we could say it's a mixed feeling. We do have some double-digit increase in one day and single-digit increase in the other day.
The state government task force on COVID-19 is doing all it takes to ensure community awareness and testing, provision of hand washing facilities, face masks, as well as other preventive measures. The COVID-19 protocols are mostly observed in schools as places of worship, markets, and other public places are still not complying with the safety protocols.
The compliance of citizens with non-pharmaceutical measures, I think is there. That is where we have some challenges that we are planning to increase the level of risk communication and community engagement activities so that to bring back that enthusiasm and drive for people to wear face masks and observe social distance.
We proceed to Edo State.
other country, but it is malaria in Nigeria.
Innocent Uzo is one Benin resident who falls in the group that still believes that the virus is a hoax. The second wave of COVID-19 and the spike in the new cases resulting in an upsurge of more than 5,000 in the last 2 weeks is beginning to change the narratives.
Here at our facility at Teaching Hospital, the total number of cases we had in November is similar to the number of cases we've had in December. That means that for the first 1 week of December alone, we've already approximated the same number of cases as what we had in the whole of November. So that's a case of worry.
A downward trend in daily infections since the end of August, with most of the days reporting few cases, has been misunderstood by some citizens who now throw caution to the wind.
We have had a decline in the number of confirmed cases, but we are still reporting new cases within the states. Going through the streets, people think COVID-19 is over, but it's important to note that it's not over yet.
The preventive measures that we put in place for us to prevent COVID-19, people, society, they are being lackadaisical about it. Face masks, there is a law in the state that when you are leaving your house, when you are going out, you must always wear your face mask.
We should try as much as possible to carry out a more sensitization.
Similarly, the massive testing in the wake of the virus seems to have reduced. These experts say must be revisited.
When they pick suspected cases, samples are taken and the samples are sent to the PCR lab.
While the state government is studying the trend of events in the wake of the second wave, stakeholders in the management of the virus say adhering to the safety protocols will go a long way in preventing the virus from spreading.
Thank you so much. Still sustaining the conversation, let's go to Dr. Sani Aliu, National Coordinator, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Doctor, well, we have gone deep so much, and a tweet came in here while I take the next question on you. It says, much talk about adherence to non-pharmaceutical measures, but there are very careful Nigerians who still contracted the virus despite all precautions. So, shouldn't the messaging include boosting the immune system in addition to adherence to the non-pharmaceutical measures?
Thank you. This is a very common question that we get. So, first of all, let me make it very clear. There's no amount of boosting of the immune system that would enable one to be protected 100% from COVID. Even the vaccines we have, which are the most effective in terms of boosting the immune system, specific for an infection, because it's different talking about boosting an immune system in general. Definitely, if you are immunosuppressed, you're more likely to develop the disease with a lower infectious disease dose. What we call the ID50 infectious disease dose, that's the percentage of those that develop the disease following a specific dose of the virus. The main reason why even careful Nigerians can still acquire it is because of the opportunity we give the virus. So, for instance, if you're very careful, you wear face mask all the time, you sanitize your hand, and then you go to a meeting and you sit down for 10 minutes or just a few minutes and have tea with somebody who has COVID, and they are sitting close to you, the likelihood is you can catch it. It doesn't matter whether you spend 18 hours that day wearing a face mask. That opportunity, that break in the barrier is enough for you to catch it. So what we are saying to people is it's not enough for you to apply protection most of the time. You need to be aware of your environment, you need to be aware of your surrounding, you need to be aware of your risks, and make sure that you are consistent when it comes to protecting yourself. So, for instance, when I go to meetings and there's lunch, for instance, I don't sit down with people to take lunch. No, I take my lunch, I go outside, pull down my mask, and then have my lunch, and then put back my mask, and then walk back in. Sometimes you'll find people when they are speaking in public, for instance, they'll pull down the mask in order to talk. These are all opportunities, all breaches that could lead to transmission. In terms of nutritional support, my view is very different to your speaker. My view is if you take a decent meal, If you're taking a balanced diet, there is no reason why you need to add any supplementation. Unless you have malabsorption or you have other underlying reasons why you would have vitamin deficiencies that would need replacement. So, for instance, in the elderly, many a times the elderly tend to have malabsorption issues and may require additional supplementation with multivitamins, etc. But if you're spending your money, spend your money on good food. It's far more useful than spending a lot of money buying expensive multivitamins, etc. And even the debate about vitamin D, there are just as many studies. There was an Italian study recently in November that showed that when they looked at patients with COVID and looked at those that were positive versus those that were negative, that were admitted, about 200 plus, I believe, in a particular hospital during their COVID outbreak, there was no difference in either the presentation or the severity of illness. And in fact, there was one specific study I remember some weeks back that did not show any positive correlation between vitamin D deficiency and severity of COVID. In fact, if anything, it showed surprisingly a correlation between high vitamin D levels and increased mortality in the COVID patients. So the issue about vitamin deficiencies or nutritional deficiencies and their link to either COVID or any other infection such as tuberculosis, because TB is actually the one that a lot of studies have been done, far more than any other disease. And with TB, I can remember clearly being an infectious disease physician, and that there was a lot of debate about vitamin D deficiency. But the fact is, there are other confounding factors that tend to apply to this. The most important thing is, if you have limited resources, buy good food, feed your family with a balanced diet. It's far more useful than spending the meager resources you have on buying expensive multivitamins, because they are expensive. And the pharmaceutical companies are making very good money with regards to this. So that's the message I want to send out. It's more important for you to make sure you follow these non-pharmaceutical interventions. And if you're doing it, you should be consistent. If you're wearing a mask in public, wear a mask consistently in public. Do not follow the crowd. If you go into a place of worship like a mosque, etc., and you look around and nobody is wearing a mask, so what? Continue to wear your mask, because the day you become sick and you catch COVID and you're on a bed in hospital, it becomes a personal tragedy for you and your family. It's not a personal tragedy for everybody else that was not using the mask. It becomes your problem that has to be sorted. And if you're not lucky, you could end up dying. So that's the message I want to pull out. But thank you so much for allowing me to join this. I may have to log out because I have other issues that I need to deal with. But thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
We thank you so much for being part of the program tonight. Thank you. Okay, back to Professor Nasidi. We have cases where state governments prevent testing, and also how do we handle issues of reduction in deaths?
Well, it is a reality that we are facing. We know of some states that are virtually gagging the healthcare workers, are trying to say there's no COVID in their state, or they not allowing the state epidemiology system to actually get enough samples to the laboratories. I have talked to so many laboratories that said they don't receive samples anymore from the state epidemiology system and so on. So when I dug further, I realized really there are cases of states where the governors were virtually suppressing these activities, which is very unfortunate. They're in denial. Some of those states now are now recording high-level deaths. Some of their VIPs are dying and so on and so forth from COVID. So the reality is now dawning on the face of those such governors. May I see this opportunity to appeal to all Nigerian governors to coordinate properly with PTF and allow the fight against COVID to be fought scientifically. We have very empowered public health officers. In Nigeria now, virtually every state has minimum of 15 to 20 well-trained public health officers with masters. So the state governors should empower them to really do this job. So if this is done, I'm sure, I can assure you, within 2-3 weeks, we can hit 2-3 million testing. That is what I have to say. So unfortunate, that state of denial is still there. The second question, how do we mitigate death? This second wave is coming with vengeance. It's spreading faster and actually seems to be killing more. The severity level is higher, and we are having, before, the cases that we are having in the wards before having the treatment centers or isolation centers were just about 10 to 20% capacity. In the last 2-3 weeks, so many of the treatment centers are overwhelmed. If before, the patients that were coming into these treatment centers, those that will require oxygen or ventilation will not be more than 15-20%. Now, those who require oxygen or ventilation are now getting to more than 60-70%. So that means severity is increasing. If before, most of the people that were having severe cases in were elderly people, now this disease, this second wave is affecting even younger people. We are seeing deaths in people aged between 20, 40 and below 50. So things are changing, and these things that are changing requires that the governments should empower those treatment centers, provide them more with, oxygen, ventilators, the required drugs that are needed to at least save lives. And of course, empower the workers. If you go to most of these treatment centers, they don't sleep. The workers are really overwhelmed. They are the frontline workers. Life is in danger. Everywhere in the world, they are usually empowered with appropriate allowances and whatever it takes to get them to work. So we believe these are things that we need to do. Of course, the last one is to increase the number of these treatment centers. With the trend now, most likely, virtually most of the treatment centers are full to capacity. We pray that this doesn't, go worse. If it goes worse, that means existing treatment centers will not be enough. So we might now start thinking of how do we get more treatment centers. So these are the few things I think, we can do to reduce deaths and also reduce morbidity and number of people that are going to the hospital and surviving. So increasing our survival rate.
Okay, follow up to what you have just said. Dr. Abubakar, NCDC is doing so much, and now we are in the second wave. What new things or introductions is the NCDC putting in place to ensure that people get more aware, get more involved, and maybe come out selflessly to present themselves for testing, like Prof. Nasser says, so the number can increase maybe from 500,000 to 2-3 million in a short while.
Yeah, so like I said, we are always engaging with the state epidemiology teams, and in our meeting recently with them, we've asked them to really intensify surveillance activities. In states where their rapid response teams are not active, they need to reactivate those rapid response teams. And we've also asked that their call centers should also be reactivated because people who want to get tested. We've also commissioned a team to ensure that no state is not having enough commodities to do testing. And having said that, I want to appeal to our people. This testing in our public laboratories are completely free. We have established, like I said earlier, laboratories across all the 36 states plus FCT. We're capable of testing over 15,000 samples daily. So we want people to take advantage of these facilities and ensure that, we increase the testing that we are doing. Also, we have started introducing rapid diagnostic testing for screening within closed settings so that when we screen and see people are positive, then they go through the PCR system, which is the gold standard. In some of these countries that we're talking about, them having large number of tests, they do the screening kind of test, not really the PCR. So I want to appeal to Nigerians, really, if you feel unwell, if you have a family member that has COVID, if you travel to somewhere and you feel that you are at risk of COVID, COVID, contacts of confirmed cases. I mean, the states have all the guidance that they need to identify people that should be tested. So let's take advantage of all these facilities and ensure we increase our testing numbers. Because it is only when we test, our strategy in Nigeria remains still testing, isolating, and treating. That way we can be able to control this outbreak. Over.
Dr. Baka, I'm still on you. We have had cases before now, I don't know if it still subsists, where your phone numbers are called, they ring out, people don't pick. Even when they pick, they don't act swiftly. Do we still have that going on?
We don't have that going on. And then, like I said, all the states now have their own call centers. They have their call numbers. These numbers are available on the NCDC microsite. So if you want to call any particular state, you can call the state. Before now, people couldn't differentiate between states having, their own call lines and NCDC having its own call line. So our lines are operational 24 hours. We have call agents moving in shifts. At each time, I think we have about 42 lines that are open, and with all agents going on shift answering calls. In fact, we have 2-3 line of responders for each call. If you need to be evaluated during the call, we have doctors that are also on that particular shift, and then they evaluate and advise appropriately. So our lines are okay and they are good now. But what I've just said is that we are urging states where their lines are not active to reactivate those lines to ensure that people have access to the lines, and then people can get also tested.
Before I allow you go, Doctor, state governments were giving money to sustain advocacy and other issues I cannot mention here. Are we having changes?
So initially, before now, we've gone into discussions with states, and then there's some facility that states are able to have access to, depending on what they prepare as their own plan. And this support has gone to all, I think 35 states. We're only having issues with 1 or 2 states that are not able to finalize within their own internal systems. And I'm happy to inform us that, quite a number of states have done wonderfully well with these funds that they have gotten. We have challenges here and there, but we are intending to send some monitoring teams to go and sit down with them and really understand where the difficulties are, where they do not execute such plans that they have in their own activities, in their own plans.
Dr. Jefia Abubakar, Deputy Incident Manager of the National Center of the National COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center, NCDs. Thanks for being on the program tonight.
Thank you so much.
Before I let you go, what's your last word?
My last word is for Nigerians to take responsibility. It is not a one man's fight. It's for everybody. All of us need to take responsibility. We should adhere to the non-pharmaceutical interventions. I've mentioned them. We should also ensure that we, avoid all non-essential travels at this time. We should ensure we avoid gatherings. When we do that, I can assure you that we'll be able to control this pandemic to some extent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jonto, for being on Tuesday Live tonight. Right.
Thank you.
Well, we have said it all, and the tweets and national coordinator who left us short while ago. What else will I say? What message do you have for Nigerians?
Well, I thank you for bringing me on this very important program. And to Nigerians, I will say throughout today, we are not talking about government, ghost or somebody far away. We are actually talking about you, about me. The danger is there in the air. It's an invisible enemy. Don't allow yourself to be hit by this enemy. Please listen to what the NCDC is saying, the PTF is saying, the WHO is saying. We must protect ourselves. Don't think we are talking about us here. We are talking about you. We are talking about us. So the fight is right on your hands. Make sure you are not hit by the invisible enemy. Thank you.
Professor Abdusalami Nasidi, pioneer DG NCDC, Provost, College of Health Sciences, University of Africa, Bayelsa State. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's it on the program. It's no child's play. Take responsibility, and I believe you'll be part of the campaign to ward off or stem the second wave of COVID-19 in Nigeria. It's all about you. It's all about us. Thank you so much for your tweets. And on behalf of all of us, don't forget to connect with the NTA in the onslaught against rape and rapists. Bye-bye.